It's pretty much a given that the James Bond one grows up with is that person's favorite James Bond. For me, that's Daniel Craig, who I first saw in Quantum of Solace. Now, it wasn't until Skyfall that it became my favorite Bond, though the point stands. But when an actor is so closely associated with a particular character, like Heath Ledger is with the Joker or Robert Downey Jr. is with Iron Man, it tends to cast a long shadow over the rest of their career. Yes, Daniel Craig is the epitome of James Bond, but James Bond is not all who he is. Craig got his start in the early 90s and put in more than a decade of work before he finally started to gain some fame. Unlike many actors who start in TV and then transition to movies, Craig did both of them concurrently. He appeared in more than a dozen TV films and episodes across as many shows. His film debut was 1992's The Power of One, and the next decade or so was just Craig putting in the work. It wasn't until 2001's Lara Croft: Tomb Raider that Craig landed one of his first significant roles as a turncoat. In 2002, he was in Road to Perdition, which got solid reviews and performed well at the box office. But it was 2004's Layer Cake, directed by Matthew Vaughn, when Craig finally got to sink his teeth into a role. He plays an unnamed coke dealer who wants out of the business, but just like Al Pacino said,
"Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in."
the movie did not make a lot of money. After all, indie movies rarely do. But it proved that not only was Craig capable of being a leading man, he also had an effortless presence. You'll almost never get a bad Daniel Craig performance. In 2005, he had a starring role in Steven Spielberg's Munich, based on the Mossad assassinations after the Munich massacre at the 1972 Summer Olympic Games. In 2006, he played murderer Perry Smith in Infamous, a subject of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, a non-fiction novel about the Clutter murders in 1959. 2006 is, of course, also the year when Daniel Craig took over the mantle of James Bond from Pierce Brosnan. Casino Royale was a smashing critical and commercial success, eliminating any remaining doubt that Craig had the chops to play the legendary figure. His casting raised plenty of eyebrows, and people wondered if he really had what it took to be Bond. The answer was an unreserved yes. I would go so far as to say that Craig has come to define Bond, far more serious and intense than his predecessors. He retains the coolness that's often associated with the character, but it almost always leaves you with a sense of unease, wondering if you really should be fascinated by a guy like this. But Craig is so effortlessly, for lack of a better word, cool, reminiscent of Paul Newman in his prime, that it's difficult to not be taken by him. Roger Ebert put it best, quote, "Daniel Craig makes a superb Bond. Leaner, more taciturn, less sex-obsessed, able to be hurt in body and soul, not giving a damn if his martini is shaken or stirred," end quote. His turn as Bond, as well as Bond himself, deserves its own video, so I'll suffice to say that Craig started off with a bang and never let up. In 2007, he was in The Golden Compass, which, while it got mixed reviews, had a solid run at the box office and won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. In 2008, he returned as Bond for Quantum of Solace. Reviews were milder, though they had more to do with the overall movie than as Craig as Bond. Casino Royale was just a really tough act to follow, though Quantum still holds a special place in my heart as my first theatrical Bond film. In 2008, Craig was in Defiance, where he played Tuvia Bielski, a Belarusian Jew that set up and helped protect Jews trying to head to safety during World War II. In 2011, he had probably the biggest flop of his career in Cowboys and Aliens, where he plays one of the titular cowboys who fights against the titular aliens. In 2011, he teamed up with Spielberg again for The Adventures of Tintin, a movie that Spielberg had been wanting to make since the early 1980s. The movie got solid reviews and did well at the box office. 2011 also saw Craig star in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, opposite Rooney Mara, and directed by David Fincher. Craig plays a character that's as far from Bond as you can get. A journalist charged with solving a disappearance in order to procure evidence for a lawsuit filed against him. It's one of Craig's best performances and shows the kind of range that he's capable of. In 2012, Craig was in what I consider to be the best Bond movie thus far, Skyfall, directed by Sam Mendes. The movie cleared more than $1 billion at the box office, the first Bond film to do so. Kim Newman, writing for Empire, put it best, quote, "Skyfall is pretty much all you could want from a 21st century Bond. Cool but not camp. Respectful of tradition but up to the moment. Serious in its thrills and relatively complex in its characters, but with the sense of fun that hasn't always been evident lately, end quote. It makes sense that Roger Deakins was nominated for Best Cinematography and Adele won for Best Original Song at the Academy Awards, but the fact that the movie was not nominated for Best Picture, Mendes for Best Director, and of course Craig for Best Actor is nothing short of stupefying. His follow-up to Skyfall was Spectre, released in 2015. It ran into the same problem that Quantum of Solace did. A competent film, but it was difficult to top Skyfall even for Sam Mendes. The same year, he also had a fun cameo in The Force Awakens as a stormtrooper. In 2017, Craig was in Logan Lucky with Steven Soderbergh. Think Ocean's 11 meets NASCAR with a lot more hilarity. In 2019, he starred in what's probably my second favorite Daniel Craig film after Skyfall, Knives Out, directed by Rian Johnson. A whodunit with obvious inspiration from Agatha Christie, Craig played Benoit Blanc, an amusing detective with a distinct southern accent. Craig also had what's one of my favorite exchanges in any movie.
I anticipate the terminus of Gravity's Rainbow.
Gravity's Rainbow.
It's a novel.
Yeah, I know. I haven't read it though.
Neither have I. Nobody has. But I like the title.
The movie was a smash success both critically and commercially and showed that Daniel Craig could play pretty much any character. In 2021, he was in No Time to Die, his final Bond film. It was a fitting send-off to a character that he had inhabited for 15 years. Most recently, he was in Glass Onion, the sequel to Knives Out that was every bit as good and incisive as the first. Like Skyfall told us more about James Bond, Glass Onion told us more about Benoit Blanc, and I'm hopeful we can expect the same from the third film. Though Daniel Craig is no longer James Bond, I think we can all still expect a long, entertaining career from him. He's got a wide range and an ability to fully inhabit whatever role he's in, even when others think that he's miscast. Never mind being a great James Bond. Daniel Craig is simply a great actor.